Good morning, seventh grade. We're down to the last week of school. So we have lessons Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. Thursday, Friday are catch-up days. We are not going to be able to finish the book, but you can keep the PDF. I hope you do finish the book on your own just because you're curious and want to know how it ends. Today, we pick up where we left off last week, where Maddie was going to head into the forest with his puppy to find Kira and bring her back for Sear before the border closes. Today's chapter is very short, so anyway, hope you enjoy it. Chapter 12. Frolic was afraid of the dark. Maddie had never noticed it before because always they had been indoors, with the oil lamp glowing at night. He laughed a little to hear the puppy whimper in fear when night fell and forest turned black. He picked him up and murmured words of reassurance, but could feel the dog's body tremble, still in his arms. Well, thought Maddie, it was time to sleep anyway. He was quite near the clearing where the frog had been, and perhaps still was. Carefully he made his way across the soft moss. Holding Frolic against his chest and feeling the way with his feet, he knelt in the gnarled root bed of the tall tree and removed his pack. He unrolled the blanket. He fed Frolic a few pieces, torn from the loaf of bread, nibbled it himself, and curled up with his puppy and drifted off. Chirrump, chirrump. Frolic raised his head. His nose twitched, and he flicked his ears curiously at the sound, but then he buried his head again under the curve of Maddie's arm. Soon he too slept. The days of the journey passed, and after the fourth night the food was gone, but Maddie was strong and unafraid, and to his surprise little Frolic did not need to be carried. The puppy followed him and sat watching patiently as he posted the messages along divergent paths. Doing so lengthened the journey considerably. If he had gone straight through, he would be approaching Kira's village, his own home in the past, quite soon. But he reminded himself being a messenger was his most important task. He took the side paths, walked great distances, and left the message of village's closure at each place where new ones coming could be advised to turn back. The scarred woman and her group had come from the east, he knew. There was a look that identified the Easterners. He could see on the path to the east remained bits of evidence they had come through not long before. Crushed underbrush where they had huddled to sleep, chunks of charcoal where a fire had been, a pink ribbon that had fallen. Maddie thought from a child's hair. He picked it up and put it in his backpack. He wondered if the woman had left her son behind and returned alone to her other children by now. There was no sign of her. The weather remained clear, and he was grateful for that, because although he had bragged about past journeys through snow, in truth it was very hard to fight the elements, and almost impossible to find food in bad weather. Now there were very early fall berries and many nuts. He laughed at the chattering squirrels who were storing their own provisions, and with little guilt robbed a nest he found that was half filled with winter fare. He knew places to fish and the best way to catch them. Frolic turned his nose up at fish, even after Maddie grilled one on a small fire. Well, go hungry then, Maddie told him, laughing, and finishing the browned, glistening fish himself. Then as he watched, Frolic cocked his ears, listened, and dashed off. Maddie heard a squawk, a flurry of wings and rustling leaves and growls. After a bit, Frolic returned, looking satisfied, with a feather stuck to his whiskers. So, I had fish and you had bird. It amused Maddie to talk to Frolic as if he were human. Since his other puppy had died, he had always traveled the paths alone. Now it was a treat to have company, and sometimes he felt Frolic understood every word he said. Although it was a subtle change, he understood what Leader had meant when he said forest was thickening. Maddie knew forest so well. He could anticipate changes that came with the seasons. Ordinarily, at summer's end, as now, some leaves would be falling, and by the time snow came later, many trees would be bare. In the heart of winter, he needed to find water at the places where streams rushed quickly and didn't freeze. Many of the quiet pools he knew well would be coated with ice. In spring, there would be irritating insects to brush from his face, but there would be fresh, sweet berries then, too. Always, though, it was familiar. But on this journey, something was different. For the first time, Maddie felt hostility from Forrest. The fish were slow to come to his hook. A chipmunk, usually an amiable companion, chattered angrily and bit his finger when he held his hand toward it. Many red berries of a kind he'd always eaten had black spots in them and tasted bitter, And for the first time, he noticed poison ivy growing across the path again and again where it had never grown before. It was darker, too. The trees seemed to have moved at their tops, leaning toward each other to create a roof across the path. They would protect him from rain, he realized, and perhaps that was a good thing. But they didn't seem benevolent. They created darkness in the middle of day, and shadows that distorted the path and made him stumble from time to time on roots and rocks. And it smelled bad. There was a stench to forest now, as if it concealed dead, decaying things in the new, thick darkness. Camping in a clearing that he knew well from previous journeys, Matty sat on a log that he had often used as a seat while he cooked his meal. Suddenly, it crumbled under him. He had to pick himself up and brush the rotting bark and slimy, foul-smelling material from his clothing. The piece of log that had been there so long, sturdy and useful, had simply fallen into chunks of dead vegetative matter. Never again would it provide Matty a place to rest. He kicked it away and watched countless dislodged beetles scurry to new hiding places. He began to have trouble sleeping. Nightmares tormented him. His head ached suddenly. His throat was sore. But he was not far now from his destination, so he trudged on. To divert himself from the discomfort forced to become, he thought about himself as a little boy. He remembered his earliest days when he had called himself the fiercest of the fierce, his friendship then with the girl named Kira, who was the blind man's daughter. That's chapter 12. I'm also going to record chapter 13 today. It's not a very long chapter either. I don't think 2 chapters is going to be too rough. Have a great day. Work hard this last week.